London is the place for me.
I just thought it was going to be this idyllic place.
London, this lovely city.
What a horrible place with all these big, smoky-looking buildings that look like prison.
You can go to France or America, India, Asia or Australia.
They don't see black people around. And to see one, people just stare and, you know, when we were there, people would say, oh, looking at us.
But you must come back to London City.
Tilbury sees the arrival of more than 400 happy Jamaicans. They've come to seek work in Britain and are ready and willing to do any kind of job that will help the motherland along the road to prosperity.
I am part of the Windrush Generation.
I'm part of the Windrush Generation.
I am part of the Windrush Generation.
In 1948, after World War II, Britain was in ruins. The British government decided that they would enlist help from British colonies in order to rebuild the war-torn country. The British West Indies was a colonised British territory located in the Caribbean. From the West Indies, many Afro-Caribbean citizens took the invitation from the government to start a better life for themselves. On the 24th of May, 1948, the HMT Empire Windrush set sail from Jamaica and arrived at Tilbury dock. The ship carried 1,027 passengers and 2 stowaways. Of these 1,027 passengers, 800 gave their last place of residence as somewhere in the Caribbean. The Windrush's arrival has become symbolic of the immigration of Caribbean citizens who came under the British Nationality Act from 1948 to 1973. These people are known as the Windrush Generation. Upon arrival, the Windrush Generation were faced with a harsh reality. They dreamed of pavements paved with gold, royalty and riches. However, they were welcomed to a racist and unjust society. On the 5th of July 1948, less than a month after the arrival of the Empire Windrush, the NHS was born. 5,000 Jamaican women were working in British hospitals by 1965. To this day, the NHS is still reliant on overseas workers to staff the health service, with 16.5% of staff reporting a non-British nationality. Many of the Windrush Generation also took work in transport. As London as a city became more culturally diverse, so did London Transport. In the workforce of today's Transport for London, over 30% identify as being black or from an ethnic minority. It is evident that the foundation of the country we live in today was built on the backs of the Windrush Generation. Yet many don't even know their names or who they are. It is evident that despite all the Windrush Generation has done for Britain, they have been through and still go through much discrimination and racial injustice. In order to find out all I can about the Windrush Generation, I have taken to interviewing some of the Windrush Generation, in hope that they can provide me with the much needed perspective of voices that have been silenced for so long. This is not my story, it's theirs.
My name is Donald Forshaw.
Joan Kent.
Pamela Griffiths.
I'm from Georgetown, Guyana.
Guyana, former British colony.
Originally I'm from Guyana.
I grew up for the first 13 years of my life in Guyana. Very, very beautiful. It's on the Atlantic coast and, it's just a tropical country. It's very beautiful.
Well, I had a brilliant childhood.
Going to the sea wall and for recreation and enjoyment and passing the time.
Pretty good, big family. My grandfather was half Scottish, so I come from a mixed race family. Because on my mother's side, there are Indian, what we call East Indians, Aborigines, Negroes, descendants from the slaves and so on. So we're like Heinz 57 varieties in my family.
Well, my dad was the son of an immigrant from India who travelled as an indentured labourer. And my mother was half Chinese, half Negro, and so her mother must have been, or her mother's parents must have been, or grandparents or whatever, must have been enslaved people.
My thoughts as a little boy in Guyana was England was a place where all the sidewalks, pavements, were lined with apple trees. And you can, when you go to England, I can just walk along a road and just pick an apple from a tree.
My mother came to me, she was divorced, my parents were divorced, and my mother just wanted, she felt there was no life in Guyana. My father and her were divorced. It was quite acrimonious sort of divorce. My father actually got custody of us. But she came to sort of start a new life for herself, and lucky for us, she sent for us.
Well, I wanted to come because the job I was doing was with a law firm, and it was my first job from school. I didn't want to go on to uni, but I said to my boss I wanted to. He said that I should really go to England just to see what it's like, because he studied his law. He did his law degree here. And a girlfriend of mine had just left to come to do nursing. And he said, well, take the opportunity and go. So I came basically for a holiday, not to stay. And I haven't been back, I just stayed, put up with the cold and the smog, and because I was independent, I didn't have anybody to say do this or do that.
It was pretty horrible without my mother. It was really terrible when she left. It was okay because I still had my dad and I had his sisters. So my sister and I stayed with one of his sisters. We were together at first, and then we were split up, and I was with one sister, and Barbara, my sister, went to another sister, where she was treated a bit like a servant, in fact, unfortunately for her.
It was for a better life, and I didn't know much about what was going on in Guyana. I mean, all I did was go to school, came home, play.
Flew from Atkinson Airfield in Georgetown to Port of Spain, Trinidad. And then we, due to catch a ship, when we arrived in Port of Spain at the docks, there was no one to meet us. So my sister and I got off the ship and we were there on our own after everybody disappeared from the port. And an immigration lady took pity on us, took us home. I was 12 going on 13, my sister was 13 going on 14. And she took us home, and we slept, 3 of us, in her bed because she only had one bed. And then the following day she gave us breakfast and took us back to the port, and we got on board the SS Antilles.
I flew from Guyana, Georgetown, to Trinidad, and then I got a boat which lasted 2 weeks, the journey from Trinidad to Southampton, I think it was.
It was okay to start with because we were stopping at other islands and picking up more people to come over who were coming to London. And then when we got out to sea properly, it was so rough and I was horribly seasick and couldn't eat. In fact, probably didn't eat for the whole of the journey. Took 2 weeks and didn't eat, just lived on biscuits. My first thoughts of it, how cold it was, how grey it was, how foggy it was as the train was pulling into London.
Coming to England, that was my first thought when I arrived in England. So, wow, how do people dry their clothes?
I think my biggest struggle was just trying to come to terms with being a teenager with a single mum in living in London, which must have been really hard for us because of the racism.
For instance, they don't see black people around, and to see one, people would just stare, and when we were there, people would say, "Oh, looking at us."
Our living situation was quite tricky. To start with, when we arrived, my mum, Barbara, and myself lived in one room in Fulham, just near Putney Bridge. And it was freezing cold. We had no central heating. That was the horrible thing.
I've never married, but I've got a daughter, and it's just a shame. I just regret not being with her at a younger age. I want to tap her on the head and buy her an ice cream, that type of thing. I never had that.
Did not remain close with my dad, although we used to write to him after we arrived. The letters soon petered out. My mum was really, she was the mainstay of our family. She saw us through thick and thin. She was brilliant. Despite the fact she was a single Caribbean woman trying to earn a living and bring up 3 children in a really difficult society in the 50s, through the 50s and 60s, really, really difficult. How were my children treated in comparison to me? I assumed they were doing as well as I did at school, but talking to my younger daughter in later years, it seems that she'd had a tough time from a racist point of view.
I think that people should know about the Windrush generation, why they came to England in the first place, what was told to them, and I don't think people really realize what they were coming to, what they were leaving to come to.
Well, being part of the Windrush generation is, I realise how much the people who came from the Caribbean at that time, what a fantastic contribution they made to building Britain after the war.
The Windrush generation are important because they came to this country with nothing. They built this country. A lot of people don't realize some of the Windrush generation were people who went to war, for instance, and they came to this country thinking that, having been to war, to defend this country, when they come back they'll be welcome. And I feel extremely sad that a lot of people didn't know about that, simply because they weren't told, they didn't know the history. And I think that a lot of people reacted to the Windrush generation through ignorance. They weren't educated, they didn't know, they just thought, oh, these dumb black people.
I would describe the Windrush generation as being hardworking, persevering, and fun.
I just hope that the descendants can be made to feel that their ancestors, their parents or grandparents made a huge contribution to this country by coming here, and I feel that the generation from that should be made to feel welcome and accepted and be lauded for what they have, rather than being treated. Some people need compensation and so on and so forth. So keep my fingers crossed that there'll be a happy outcome.